Hi, I'm Mitch, and welcome to the Restoration Road, where my guest today is the one and only Lynne Ford. Lynne, thank you so much for being here.
I'm your baby sis still.
You are?
Yeah.
I cannot believe how fast time goes.
I know.
You look the same when you started at WBCO, and
No,
you were
I was a brunette when I started at BCL. But thanks.
and you were there 33 years.
Yeah. Great job.
You didn't want to be on the radio to start out, right?
No. They hired me to be the receptionist secretary to the manager. So they hired me. I started on Monday. They fired me on Friday because I was a terrible secretary. So this was before computers, and so you had to use whiteout. Everything I typed had like a topography to it. I mean, they couldn't send anything out because it looked horrible. So they fired me. And then on Saturday, the owner called me and said, hey, you're not a very good secretary, but you're really fun. So how about if we teach you what it takes to be on the radio, and then you can do a morning shift. So we were a young couple with a young baby, and I would have swept floors. I just needed a job. And so they hired me, and the Lord,
wow.
I can't say he took it from there because he was involved in that step as well, but yeah.
End up having about 100,000 listeners?
The station did, and it's still growing. Radio is so different these days. You know, it's not so, it's about what's on the air, but on the air is streaming live, and you've got Facebook, and you've got, you know, podcasts and Twitter and all these other things. So there's so many components feeding into it.
You were so kind to have me on with you for 10 or 11 years, once a month, and we had a blast, and we would take...
You just scared me.
What do you mean?
Because you're really smart.
Oh, I am not.
And you're a Bible teacher, and so Char Binkley and I were both hosting, and so it was like, who was going to be the one to interview Mitch? And I said, you really need to do it. And she said, yeah, but he's a movie guy, and I don't know movies. So that was
movie guy.
And a culture guy. So that was the only reason why she deferred to me.
Because you know culture.
But then I was thinking, this guy knows the Bible, and he's really deep, and I'm not sure how this is going to go. But then I experienced what all of our listeners experienced. And that is that you are a teacher storyteller. And the Lord has gifted you with the ability to take the truth of Scripture and shape it in a way. It's like you pre-chew for us. It's amazing. And then we're fed. So it was great to have you with us.
And that concludes the Restoration Road today. Well, I can't believe it seems like yesterday. You retired, and you've been in retirement for 2 years, but you read like crazy. You picked up new things, new talents. Can you talk about what those are?
So I've been reading like crazy because I love to read. And all of my reading for my work was work stuff because there wasn't enough time to read for fun. So I probably read, I don't know, 2 or 3 books a week still. And things that I really love. So right now I'm reading about the lost colony of Roanoke. Just finished a book on Mary Queen of Scots, have one going on George Washington and one on Thomas Cromwell. And so that's really fabulous to be able to do that. And there's a lot of spiritual food in that. You see the Lord's hand in the history of mankind.
Well, George Washington, I think, went out and prayed for 3 hours or something when he was going to be the first president. I think Congress prayed all day.
For the right time, had the heart to do what needed to be done. So learning guitar and just getting ready to pick up Italian. So,
are you serious?
Yeah, I've always wanted to learn Italian.
Because you are Italian, right?
Italian on this side, Portuguese on this side. I had no hope of having a cute little ski nose like yours. Sorry. Which is why when I get a cold, it takes a residence there because it's like this palatial palace. All the germs go, we're not leaving. We're not. This is our dream nose.
What are you going to do with Italian?
We're going to make one more trip, I think, back next fall. And so first time we went, I learned a few phrases. I learned how to say, you know, simple things like good morning, how much is this, where's the bathroom? I learned to say, my name is Lynne, this is my husband Doug. And then there was a hat maker in Italy named Antonio Gatto. And his great aunt made the vestments for the priests. And that's how he learned to sew. And he has this amazing little hat shop in Florence. So I said to Doug, when we go to Florence, I want to buy a hat. So I learned how to say, hello, my name is Lynne, I want to buy a hat.
Can I hear it?
Il mio nome è Lynne, vorrei comprare un cappello.
What do I say for yes?
C.
It is C?
Yeah. So anyway, he wasn't there when I went in, but his associate was there, and I said, I want to buy a hat. She called him And in strides this short, because most Italian men are short, maybe 5'7". He was in camel pants, camel-colored top. He's carrying aviator glasses. He had loafers on with no socks. Just like, I mean, he was breathtaking in his glory. And so I said, I want to buy a hat. And he said, well, he spoke really good English with a lovely Italian accent. And he said, I could buy one off the shelf. I said, no, I want one to fit my head, because Indiana winters, there's a lot of wind and it blows anything that's not fitted off your head. So he stayed late, went out and bought felt and made me a hat.
Oh my goodness.
Because we were leaving Florence the next day.
Oh my goodness.
And we picked it up and it was in a hat case with a handle. So the rest of our vacation was, who's got the hat? Where's the hat? Is the hat okay?
That is tremendous.
So anyway, and it means a lot when, even if you speak bad Italian, the fact that you try,
they appreciate.
Yeah, and I learned how to say, which I forget, which I need to learn again, I love your country. So yeah.
And you're leading worship with the guitar?
No, I just wanted to learn to play for myself.
Oh,
yeah.
I thought I heard through the grapevine you might be leading worship.
No, but Char and I spoke for the first time at a retreat, and I led worship there. I sang.
You did?
Yeah. So I did.
But you're not going to do it routinely.
I don't play well enough yet, but I did I wrote a new chorus for Trust and Obey in a different version of it. So,
Lynne, are you kidding me?
But the funny thing was, I've only been playing like 8 months, and it only had 4 chords. It was pretty simple. So I said to the women, look, I just learned, but I really feel like I can do this in front of you, and I'd love to do it. So if anything happens, you just keep singing. But it was beautiful, and now I know people who lead worship, there is this unique communal experience with the God of heaven and the people that you're leading. It is such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. Tommy Walker would say, one ear towards heaven, one ear towards the ground.
I almost slid off the bench. It was slick, but other than that, that was when I sat down. I kind of did this slide across the bench, and I said, I've not yet mastered all the really details of playing guitar, but my heart's awesome. In the right place.
Well, I brought you today to talk about making sense of why bad things happen to good people. And when we talk about God is close and that He saves, do you want to treat this like the radio show?
So I have come prepared to talk with you and to ask you questions.
Let's just do that.
So you started off.
Well, usually a difficult turn of events will cause us to doubt God. And that's happening inside us. That's not from God. And it might be pain and suffering that have paralyzed us with fear. And in order to make sense of this, we need to realize that God is close and He saves. And even though trying moments come our way, He remains near to protect us. And there was a time in my life where I had to memorize this verse and recite it again and again and again, along with, though He slay me, I will hope in Him. It was a rough time, rough patch. And it's this, David wrote, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and He saves those who are crushed in spirit. And if you're brokenhearted and you're crushed in spirit, you need to know that He's close and He saves. And that's Psalm 34:18.
Our conversation today, you've entitled Perspective Number 5, God is close, He saves. And when I was reading that, and He's near to protect. So when I read the title, there were 3 things that jumped out at me.
Oh, cool.
So the truths that you used in the title, God is close, He saves, and He is near to protect. Those things are true, no matter what. But there are things that appear to be true for us in a difficult circumstance that can cancel out the truths about who God is. So God is close is true, but we can have a sense that God is far away.
Yeah.
So that's one. The next one is God saves, but we could say, but wait a minute, He's not saving me from the circumstance or the ongoing outflow of that. God protects, but He isn't protecting me because I'm still hurting. So my Bible teacher friend, will you make sense of that for us? Will you reconcile that?
I'll try. It's really a perspective shift. We have to take off our fallen perspective glasses. Maybe it's the perspectives of others that we're trying to see life through. And we need to put on God's crystal clear 2020 vision. And And that's why confess becomes so important, is we agree with God about the fallenness of our own choices that we've maybe brought to the situation, and that we're looking at this from a highly temporal point of view of just the here and now, because we can't get past, at first, typically, to what God's greater good is for our journey. I was just talking with a group of volleyball players, young ladies, and I told them about my horrible experience with bridges. My dad, when I was probably 5 years old, was taking us to, is it Mackinac Island or Mackinac Island?
Mackinac.
Mackinac. And we're crossing the bridge. This bridge is enormous. I think it's 5 miles long. It goes up, you know, and you can't see where you're going, and it looks like the steel goes to the skies, and it's one of the biggest bridges in the world. And as we're going across, I notice in the back seat that I'm starting to feel really, really weird and scared, like the biggest fear I've ever felt in my short 5 years. And it doesn't help that my dad says, yeah, 5 people died while they were building this thing. And I dove to the bottom of the floor, and I closed my eyes until we were what I thought would be across, and I look out the back window, and I think, oh my goodness, there's no way I'm going back that way. Well, fast forward 14 years, and I'm pretty sure Susan and I are married, and we're on this trip in a motorhome with my mom and dad and my brother Stuart. And I'm driving up to the bridge, same trip, and I'm getting closer and closer, and I'm telling you, I felt like my heart was beating outside my chest. I thought, that was just a 5-year-old's perspective. I start looking, and I thought, oh my goodness, and my hands are getting sweaty, and I'm feeling cold and hot and all the same things, and I thought, I can't do this. Yeah. This is crazy. And so I pull over to the side, and I'm hearing, you know, all that kind of stuff. And Susan says, what are you talking about? I'll do it. And she gets behind the wheel and drives us across. And I wanted to go down to the floor and hide my eyes till we got across. But it was windy that day, too. And I was feeling the top of the motorhome going like that. Well, I realized there's a big name for it, and I can't remember what it is, but I realized I had that, like, fear of bridges. I don't mind a flat one, but I really can't stand one where you go up, like you're going into the sky and there's no end, and you have no idea where the turn or the dip is going. Now, on the way down, I feel a little better, but it's that point. The same thing happened to me just recently. I went to watch Lily play volleyball for Liberty University back-to-back in Jacksonville, 2 universities in the city of Jacksonville. And I'm just tooling along. I thought, man, it's been kind of cold here. I'm gonna rent a convertible, and I'm gonna be on my own, and I'm just gonna go down and back. And so I'm zipping out of the airport in my Mustang convertible. I'm tooling along. I said, man, this weather's nice. And you make this turn, and all of a sudden, boom, there's this bridge that looks just like the Mackinac Bridge to me. And I think, I can't do this. I can't do this. There's nowhere to pull off. I have no choice but to keep going. And I prayed out loud, Jesus, literally take the wheel. I can't do this. But as I went, you know, inch by inch, I felt better. And I started analyzing, you know, man, what am I afraid of? I think I'm afraid that God didn't create gravity. I think that's the bottom line. And so I started like talking to myself, give myself a pep talk over it. I came back over real early the morning I had to leave, and I laughed out loud because I thought, this isn't a big deal. I don't know what's going on. But I talked to these girls, I told the story, and I said, in general, we got to move from fear to faith. And I gave them the acronym for faith, forsaking all, I trust him. And what happens with fear and thinking that God's not protecting me, he's not doing this now, he's not close, you know, fear is setting in. And fear is what the Bible talks about most often in its most frequent command, fear not. It's anxiety, it's a divided inner being. It's 1 foot in with God and 1 foot out. And it's that foot that's out that we're trusting in ourselves a whole lot more than we're trusting in God. And so we know we're not all that. And we know that we can't control this. We can't control any outcome. And all that needs to shift, all that fear needs to shift back to faith, trusting in the God of the universe. So I think we got to pursue him in those moments. He's pursuing us, but we got to respond.
I was reading about the Native American Indians, and so Native American fathers, when they wanted to teach their boys courage, at some point would take.
They would take them on bridges.
Well, it's along the same lines, but they would take their son into the woods at night and leave him. And they would park him there and say, we'll be back in the morning. And so this lone Indian boy, you know, probably 10, 11, 12. So he is very much aware of what is there that could hurt him, and then he's got his imagination of what else might do that. And it was only when the dawn would happen and the sun would come up, the Indian boy would see his father behind a tree with his bow drawn, and he'd been there all night, ready to protect his son. Now, it's not a perfect analogy because bad things still happen to us, but it is our soul that God protects. That is secure for us in heaven. And I don't know if you know who Laurie Pollock Short is. When Changing Nothing Changes Everything. It's one of my favorite books from 33 years in radio. I interviewed her my last year, and it's just a phenomenal book. But she says this, look at what is happening to you as building something in you helps you view your circumstances, listen to this part, as giving you something you need for the path ahead. Would you like to hear that again?
I would.
Okay.
This is so much better than what I said.
Look at what is happening to you as building something in you helps you view your circumstances as giving something you need for the path ahead. So we give ourselves to what is happening now, believing that this is not just a bad circumstance to have a bad circumstance. We live in a fallen world. We're going to have awful things happen, but the Lord is using this. He's allowed it to pass through his hands to bring some good to our life. There's a couple more quotes that tie into this.
My dad says, strongest steel's made in the hottest fire.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of times when you're going through really difficult circumstances, you need to realize that the God of the universe who is close and does save is fashioning you into be something much stronger.
God doesn't preclude difficulties in your life, but he filters them and screens them so that only that which will enrich you enters your experience. His love is dependable and absolutely trustworthy. That's E. Stanley Jones is one of my favorites. He's got a couple devotionals out, was a missionary in India, and the Lord, for some reason, uses the way he writes to just, there's illumination every time for me. I'm really grateful for that. And then from John Newton, God's people have no assurances that the dark experiences of life will be held at bay. This part is pretty funny. Much less that God will provide some sort of running commentary on the meaning of each day's allotment of confusion, boredom, pain, or achievement.
Oh, wow.
It is no great matter where we are, provided we see that the Lord has placed us there and that he is with us.
It's powerful.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, it really is. In essence, that reminds me of a couple of things. One is what Philip Yancey said, that a magnifying glass magnifies what the focal point is and everything around it is fuzzy. So we're either going to magnify Christ in the challenges, in the difficult times, and the circumstances are going to be fuzzy, or we're going to magnify the circumstances and Christ is going to be fuzzy. And it's a very real illustration of that is when Peter jumped out of the boat and was walking on water, and then it says he saw the wind. So he started making the circumstances the focal point, and he went down, and Jesus grabs him. But as long as he was focused on Christ, he was doing fine. So that is a huge part of a paradigm shift that needs to take place when we're in that moment of suffering.
Can I share a couple of takeaways on
Yes.
this? This is just a side trail. You mentioned Peter going under. There's I think he's a Korean painter, and he's done one of this particular scene, but he's doing it from the perspective of Peter looking up through the water. So what he's seeing is Jesus and his hand coming down through the water. It is so powerful. I'll have to find it for you.
Yeah,
and if you just Google some of those words, it'll come up.
will.
So the takeaway for me from this whole thing of what about suffering, and it's been what I've lived it in some way over the past couple of years, is to set your eyes on Jesus. When BCL was doing some remodeling, there was a statue of Jesus that had been in the lobby that was probably about this tall, and he's standing there, his arms are out. And it was, anybody could take it if they wanted it. So I waited a few days because I wanted to take it, but I didn't want to grab it first. It was still there, so I took it, and it sits on my desk. And so literally, it's it's right in front of me as I read or study. So I'm setting my eyes on Jesus out of Hebrews 11, because Jesus set his eyes on the joy that was before him, and that strengthened him, allowed him to hang on to the resolve and the commitment to suffer the cross. And so for us to be able to follow his lead in that, he is our example in all things. And it's such a strengthening thing to know that when we set our eyes on him, everything else fades away and we receive what we need. And the Lord speaks to us through that. So that's really helpful for me. I was reading the James Moffat translation of Mark, the story of Jairus' daughter dying. And so I love his translation. So the story is that he's just come from healing the man of lots of demons, comes back and he's walking around, and Jairus, the synagogue president, comes up and says, "My daughter's ill, please come heal her." And then there's a story that interacts that with the woman of blood, and then it picks up again. And it's the servants that come, and they say to him, "Don't bother the teacher, your daughter is dead." In the Moffat translation, what follows that information is, instantly Jesus ignored the remark. Instantly Jesus ignored the remark. All the servants knew was, this child is dead. But Jesus knew what God had planned. When we're in suffering, we listen to a lot of voices around us. We listen to our own voice that plays out the worst catastrophe. We listen to the enemy's voice that tells us God isn't faithful, he's not trustworthy, he doesn't care. We need to ignore those remarks that are based only on what's in front of us and trust that God has a big plan for our life.
I love that Hebrews 12 imagery of the runner, what you talked about, fixing your eyes on Jesus, and it was a picture of a runner looking at his marker, the author and perfecter, beginner and finisher of our faith. But it says, let go of the sin that so easily entangles us. And runners in their training, this was a picture that I believe the writer of Hebrews was communicating, would have these weights hooked into their vests in order to train, and then they'd take them off and would run faster, almost like a batter before he swings, has the weight on the bat on deck, and then he goes up and swings what feels like a lighter bat. That's a picture of desiring life apart from God, entering the fabric of our inner being, and how that becomes a barrier to our focus on him. And so trust is the issue, faith is the issue. We need to refocus our trust where it's appropriately placed, and that's in the God of the universe, who everything that you just read by these great scholars and hymn writers, that he's fashioning us, he's working, he's going through it with us, and many times he's carrying us through that. But we're the ones that really get in the way of the perspective that he gives us so graciously, and that's the one of eternity in our relationship with him being first and foremost. Everybody knows Romans 8:28. It seems like in churches, they'll say everything works together for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. But the very next verse tells you what good is and what the definition of success for God is, and that is to be shaped like Christ. So no matter what's going on in our lives, we can become more like Christ. He will shape us and fashion us to have his heart, more so reflective in those circumstances. And then that's how he uses us in order to draw others to himself.
I had one more thing to what you just said. We feel so, or can feel so isolated in our suffering, that it's about us. But everything about our life is bigger than that. This is not a bomber plane, but I'm going to go back to Laurie Pollock Short's book, When Changing Nothing Changes Everything. And she shares the story of near the end of World War II, when the battle was beginning to turn, the British would do daily bombing raids in Berlin. So they would send a bomber over with some smaller planes to protect them against the German planes. And one evening after a successful attack, they were heading back to England, and out of nowhere came all of these German planes to attack them. Well, one of the bombers got left behind, and so there was nothing to protect him from what might happen. And sure enough, out of nowhere comes this German plane. And the crew are terrified because here comes this plane's getting closer and closer, and finally gets within range to shoot at them. And they hear it. They hear 5 thuds. And they begin to smell gas. It's hit near the gas tank. They're waiting for their plane to explode, but nothing happens. So they get back to England, they land the plane, they get off, the mechanic comes on to check out the plane, finds the 5 bullets, brings them out, hands them to the pilots, and they open the first 4. There's no gunpowder in any of them. And then they open the 5th bullet, and there is this wadded up note. And they take it out and they smooth it out and they read it, and it says, "We are Polish POWs forced to make bullets in the factory. When our guards aren't looking, we do not put in gunpowder.
Oh my goodness.
It is not much, but it is the best we can do."
Oh my goodness.
So for you and for me and for everyone else in our suffering, it matters for others.
Oh yeah.
It matters for our brothers and sisters who are watching, and it matters for those that are not yet believers who are watching, because we do everything differently because of Jesus and His Spirit that lives in us.
Amen. Lynne, thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure.
It flew by. It flew by. We could talk forever. I want to ask you today, you know, what's going on in your life that's left you brokenhearted, that's left you crushed in spirit? Would you realize that the God of the universe is close and He saves? He's going to save you from yourself, from your fallenness. He's going to save you from the enemy, the evil one. He's going to save you from micromanage your life by other people's perspective, their fallen perspective. He will give you that crystal clear perspective, His 20/20 vision of who you are, why He brought you on this scene of events now, and how He wants to use you to be shaped more like Christ in order to draw others to Himself. So I invite you to memorize Psalm 34:18, recite it every day this week, and experience the joy that'll come from the intimacy you will have with the God of the universe, who will make you new again. Hi, I'm Mitch. Join Lemuel Vega and me on the Restoration Road next week as we talk about Christmas behind bars.